Welcome to Doctor and the Dude. I am Dr. Jim Siebert, and joining me is my good friend Josh Morgerman, Mr. Hurricane Hunter. Josh, you've had a busy week. You have been out to Mexico and back and covering a storm. So let's just get right to it. Give us a rundown. Give us a report on how things went with Rosalind.
Rosalind turned out to be a little monster. Now, folks in the U.S., when they hear about a hurricane landfall late in October, they think, wow, that's really late in the season. Not for the East Coast or the West Coast of Mexico. Actually, late October is when they tend to get the big impacts. And in fact, Rosalind was the third time that I was on the West Coast of Mexico for a major hurricane on the day of October 23rd. It was a very small hurricane, very, very small, and it moved fast. So it didn't last long, but it was extremely violent. I think for me, it was the most terrifying hurricane I've been in all year. I was in a little town called Santa Cruz in the Mexican state of Nayarit. The hurricane made a perfect direct hit on the town. We went through the eye. We had two periods of violent winds, each one lasting about 15 or 20 minutes on either side of the eye. And then the thing was gone. But the damage was very heavy. There was just major destruction.
Now, Josh, how often have you been in a building in a hurricane when the roof gets ripped off like you were in Rosalind?
It's happened too many times. Well, or maybe it happens because I'm always getting in the right spot. But,
Yes.
With Rosalind, it was such a small, fast-moving hurricane. But by the time we got in the right location, it was like 5 a.m. It was dark. We didn't really have a place to stay. So we decided to stand up against the wall of a restaurant on its patio. And the hurricane, to be perfectly honest, I think of myself as an expert, but the hurricane was quite a bit more violent than I expected. And at the height of the storm, the whole roof of the patio just started blowing away. And my partner and I found ourselves sort of curled up in little balls under a counter on the patio, while just wreckage was just blowing around every direction. It was really, I'm laughing about it now, but
Right.
I was concerned.
Yeah,
So-
I would definitely be concerned too. And that reminds me of a good point about hurricanes though, because a lot of times when we're watching these things from a distance, from like on satellite imagery, the hurricane might look very small. And we're like, oh, that's no big deal. But the small ones are also the ones that have typically the strongest winds because of the circulation within that system.
It's true. When it comes to hurricanes, so often small equals vicious.
Yeah.
And the hurricanes, most of the hurricanes I've been in where the winds like really freaked me out were these sort of tiny, violent systems. It's the larger hurricanes that tend to produce bigger storm surges and greater rainfall totals. And I think of like Ian is a good example. But it's those small, violent, fast-moving ones that just have this really almost like an angry energy when they hit. It's really interesting.
Well, at least that one is over. You're back. You're safe. Everything is as well at this point. And so now let's talk about what's going to be happening, for the next month. I mean, we still have a month of hurricane season.
Yep. And actually, I'm glad you brought this up because, of course, I'm going to grill you right now, Dr. Jim.
Here we go.
Sorry. So let's talk. I want to ask you some stuff about the season overall, but I want to focus first on a specific thing that everyone on Twitter is talking about. It's that disturbance in the Caribbean. That the computer models, especially the GFS, have been showing some provocative scenarios. Let's start with that. What do you think? What's up with that?
Well, the challenge with that is at this point, there's so many variables working on this system, and we've been tracking it for several days already, that the computer models have not been able to agree if this would stay in the Caribbean, if it would go into Central America, if it would head towards the US. And even as we're talking about it now, it's still very much up in the air. Now, once we get towards the fringes of a season, like hurricane season, or even the summer, the winters, computer models don't do as well in the fringes. And this storm is kind of one of those fringy sorts of things. So at this point, Josh, it's really too hard to say exactly what's going to happen with this, other than we have to kind of keep watching it at this point. And I really don't like that answer, but that's honestly the answer. And sometimes when it comes to tropical weather, we don't like the answer because we just don't know as of yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But just to make folks in the US feel a little better, I'll say climatologically, the odds of a hurricane landfall now are getting very low. This thing, by the time it got to the US, it would be in November. And the US has only had 3 hurricane landfalls in November since 1851. So the odds are we wouldn't have too much problems with this. So let's talk big picture, the time we have left. The season overall, it seems like we're a little below what was forecast. What are your thoughts about how things are shaping up?
Well, that's correct. I mean, things are definitely below. I mean, as far as the numbers, major hurricanes from the NOAA forecast said we'd have 3 to 5. We've had 2. 6 to 10 would be, so major hurricanes to hurricanes, the 6 to 10 hurricanes, and we've only had 5. And again, it's an only. And 14 to 20 named storms, and again, we're about 11. So, most likely we'll be below that. At this point, though, what I do think we're going to see, Josh, is we're going to see more spin-ups, more out in the middle of the Atlantic. And then we'll see those storms like head towards Europe or head towards Portugal more than that. And that's what I'm seeing with the computer models, at least on the longer range at this point. And those storms are really interesting because sometimes they are tropical in nature and sometimes they're subtropical in nature. And I realize most of us don't care what the difference is. It's the structure with the storm and how it's developed. So, Josh, I do think we're going to see more of those. And I do also think that for the most part, I think the averages are going to play out here, meaning it looks pretty good for us here in the US. But ships and ocean things, they'll still be active for the next little while. So we're out of time for this go around. Josh, thanks for joining me as always. And everyone, continue to be safe for the rest of this hurricane season.